Hi, this is Josh Wander, the host of the Prepper Report, and welcome again to this show. This is the nation's only show that is specifically geared to emergency preparedness. Today we're going to have an interesting episode. It's going to deal with kids and emergency preparedness. I brought two of my daughters in, my daughter Tamar and my daughter Sarah. And Sarah and Tamar are going to discuss with us what they think as kids, because I don't want, this was not scripted in any way, and I don't want to have something that is artificial. I want to have an honest discussion about what kids think about disasters and preparedness. So here we go. Let's have some fun. Sarah, thank you for coming. Tamar, thanks for coming. What do you think about being prepared? Do you have any ideas about being prepared, Tamar? Well, do you think that you're prepared for an emergency? If there was an emergency, would you be prepared? You can't nod. You have to speak.
Yeah.
Yes. How are you prepared?
For a fire, we have a ladder. We need to climb out the window. We have a smoke detector, and we have.
Well, that's one of the things when you're in school, right? Anybody who's in school, they have people come and different professions, and they discuss different things. And one of the things that most schools have sometime during the year is a fireman that comes in, right, with a fire hat and all his uniform and some gear, and he talks about what it's like to be a fireman. And during that demonstration, they teach you things, right? So they teach you about smoke alarms. They'll teach you about stop, right? Stop, drop, and roll. What is stop, drop, and roll?
Stop whatever you're doing and drop and then roll.
When do you do that?
When there's a fire.
Not when there's a fire, when there's a fire in you, right? When somebody's on fire, they need to drop on the floor and they have to start rolling in order to put out the fire. So that's an important thing that's taught to kids. And about smoke alarms, and like you said, about ladders. That's part of being prepared, that everybody, even if you're not a prepper, everybody that's living a normal life, one of the things they're going to discuss in life, whether it be in school, whether it be at your synagogue or church, whether it be a community organization, you're going to be discussing things like what, Sarah? Like how to be prepared. So what happens when there's, let's say your mother is cooking and there's a lot of smoke in the kitchen and it goes up into the smoke alarm? What does the smoke alarm do?
It makes smoke go out.
It doesn't make it go. It makes a lot of noise, right? It starts going beep, 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 right? And then we have to go take one of those poles, from a broomstick, and we have to stick it up and shut it off and reset it, right? But if there's a real fire, you know what that's for. And a real fire at night, if everybody's sleeping and there's a fire, people wouldn't even know there's a fire until it might be too late, and they'll be killed. So what do they have to do? They have to have smoke alarms on every floor to warn them if there's smoke, right? It'll wake them up, make that loud noise. It'll wake them up, and that way they'll know that there's a fire and they can get out quickly, right? Now another thing they teach you, right?
You have to touch the door. You have to feel
Right, you have to feel, exactly, you have to feel the door, and if it's what?
If it's hot, you can't go in it.
If it's hot, you can't open that door, right? Because there could be a big fire outside that you don't see through the door, so you don't know what's on the other side. And it could be that there's a big fire on the other side, and if you open up the door, that fire can rush inside where you are, and that could be very dangerous. So you want to make sure that you feel the door, and if it's hot, you don't want to open that door, right? Now, some other things we have most people have in the house, or should have in the house, are those, you were talking about it earlier, about the red things. What are those called?
The spray.
The spray. What is it called? Fire extinguisher. Right? You know what those do?
They put out fire.
To put a fire.
Yeah. Let's say there's a fire. You have one of these these fire extinguishers, and it sprays the fire, and it puts it out. So if there's a small fire that's contained, it's not a big fire in the whole house, but if it's a small fire, you can use that fire extinguisher, let's say a fire in the kitchen, to put it out quickly and make sure it doesn't spread to the rest of the house, right? So those are things that people have. Also, what do we have? We also have a ladder at home. You know about the ladder that's in our closet? How does that work,
I
Sarah?
remember on Shabbos, the candles, they were burning, and we needed to put it outside.
That's right. Sometimes if you have something burning, let's say you have a candle that's burning. Now on the Sabbath, as Orthodox Jews, we're not allowed to put out fires unless there's an emergency and our life's in danger. We're not allowed to put out or start a fire on our Sabbath. But so what you're talking about is we light Sabbath candles, right, Sarah? We light Sabbath candles, and since there was some problem with them one week, we had to take them outside because it was becoming dangerous, right? So, but I'm talking now about the ladders. The ladder we have on the second floor, somebody who has a multi-level house, and there's a fire, so they may not be able to go downstairs because there might be a fire downstairs. So the way to get out of the house is, yeah, what is it tonight?
Take the ladder, and if you need to go out the window, you have to drop it down. It's a rope ladder. It's very long.
Mm-hmm. There's a long ladder, and it drops out through the window, connects to the windowsill, and then you can climb down through the window instead of having to walk down the stairs that we normally do to get outside. You can climb out through the window, right? So these are things we all do. Yes.
If there's a fire in the house, how do the children go if they start to fall?
What happens if there's a baby inside the family and you can't, like...
That's a good question. If there's a baby or if there's children. So first of all, you have to always, as always, you have to listen to your mother and your father, and they have to tell you what to do. And if there's a baby, then whoever is able to take that baby outside, however you get outside, you have to make sure that the baby, because the baby can't walk, right? So we have to make sure that the baby, somebody takes the baby out. That's one of...
I could take the baby.
Well, we have to make sure, it's really important that when you go outside...
But how do you hold her if you hold it on the ladder?
That's a great question. Well, with the ladder, you could do it with one hand. It's really difficult. I would let your mother and father do that. But you could do it with one hand. Also, you know that your mother has something that connects to her, right? A sling, and she can put the baby inside, and she can climb down the ladder. It's a great question,
It's
though.
a long time to put it,
No, it does take a minute. But you know, let me tell you something else.
If
And I want to remind everybody.
If you take the blue one, then it'll be easier.
Oh, right. I want to remind everybody that, how old are you?
4.
You're 4 years old, right? So, and how old are you? 8. What grade are you going into? Third. And what grade are you going into?
I don't know.
You're going into nursery? So that's good. So you know what? You guys know a lot, right? Because most people that are going into 3rd grade or going into nursery, they don't know so much about this, but it's important things. Now there's other disasters, other kind of emergencies besides fire, right, Tamar? What kind of emergencies can you think of besides a fire? What other natural disasters can you think of?
Hurricane.
A flood, a hurricane. Very good. Let's talk a little bit about that. Okay? What about a hurricane?
Yeah.
What is a hurricane?
A hurricane, something from the sky what comes down and
That's right.
bring everything away.
Right, it's a big wind, right? And it comes a big storm, and it can knock things. It can knock down buildings. It can knock down bridges, cars,
It can knock down houses.
whole houses. That's right. So what do we do in a case of a hurricane? If we hear there's a hurricane, there's a warning, there's a tornado. Basement. A lot of people say that's right, that you should get into the basement because the basement is under the ground, right? So let's say a big tornado or hurricane would come and knock down the house. At least you would be safe under the ground.
But wouldn't it pull it out of the ground?
No, because it's cement and it's inside. You can't pull the ground out, right? So it's just now things could fall on you. You have to be careful, make sure things don't fall on you. But you want to be in the most secure part of the house,
But
which is for that scenario is usually a basement.
If we go in Zadie's room, then you're not going to go in the mess.
Right, but let me ask you another question. If you're going downstairs, if there's a flood and the downstairs is full of water, is the basement a good place to be? No, it's the opposite, right? When there's a flood and there's water downstairs, you want to go up as high as possible.
Like to the attic?
Could be in the attic. It depends. We're very fortunate. We live in a high part of Pittsburgh, but some people live in the lower, closer to the river.
How do we go in the attic if the hurricane washed the attic out?
Right. Well, usually you don't have a hurricane and a flood all together. So you have to determine. You have to listen to your father and mother and decide what the danger is and decide what you're going to do.
But if the hurricane wash up our whole house, and
If the hurricane comes and no, you mean knocks down the house? So that hopefully that we'll be safe in the basement. You're right. But sometimes,
if you go in the attic, you can't go in it because sometimes people's attics are a mess. Sometimes.
yeah, but you don't worry about a mess when people's lives are in danger, right? If there's a fire or a flood or a tornado, messes are not what's important then. And that's a good point though. She raises a good point. If there's a fire or some danger that you have to get out of the house quickly, do you go through your mess and you start saying, I want to keep this, I want to, we're going to lose, I want to save this doll, or I want to save this toy? And once again, do you start grabbing things that you want to save? No, you get out quickly, because the most important thing is to get out alive. It's not to start looking for things and finding things.
But if you go into an attic and there's like a fire, and there's something inside of the attic that's flammable, or like the attic's wood,
Mm-hmm.
the attic would catch on fire really easily.
Right. So in a fire, right, the most important thing is to get out of the house, because you don't want to stay in the house, especially because fires go up generally, right? The flames go up. So you don't want to be high in the attic, especially in America. A lot of the houses are made out of wood, and they burn down very quickly. So you don't want to be up in the attic, hiding in the attic.
If there a big water in the attic, in the basement, you can't go in because it goes down because it's up to the top.
That's right. So what do you want to do in a flood? You want to be high up. Now, if it may be high up in your house, or sometimes it means getting out of your house quickly before the flood and running away to a place that's higher up.
What happens?
If there's even water outside on the porch, then you can't go outside.
Right, but that's why you have to listen to the weather reports, and you have to hear if there's floods coming. Sometimes you have to escape, you have to get out, and you have to go outside the flood zone before the floods come, right? Because once the floods come, it might be too late.
Sometimes there are floods when they say there will be, and then you don't, you'll just leave for nothing.
That's true, but you know what? That happens sometimes. You're right. Sometimes people leave for nothing, but it's better to leave for nothing and be alive, and then one time it being for real and being stuck there, right? So yes.
Sometimes if there's water downstairs, next to the steps, you can't go through.
That's right.
Usually there is water inside the basement because that's where all the water comes through from the rain.
Right. So if there's floods, usually the basement is the first place that gets flooded. And the problem is there's something called flash floods, which happen very, very quickly, and people can't really prepare. It's too late to get out once there's a flash flood. And it happened actually in Pittsburgh. I don't know if you remember, there was a time when there was a flood, and it came down a mountain and people got killed. Did you hear about that? That people were killed? And we actually know somebody who has saved people that was there. She was driving in her van, and she opened up her van very quickly. And she put all the people inside, and she drove away very quickly, and that actually saved their lives. But you have to think very quick in those cases what to do.
Abba,
her husband was a rabbi.
Yeah, and
Abba, if we had our big van, then we can. If there's a fire, you can take people in.
that's right.
Save their life.
That's right. Well, even if you have a small car, always try to save people's lives, right, as much as you can.
And especially if you have an empty trunk, you can fit people inside there.
Right.
But if there's no if it always the people die, you can't take them.
Right. You try to. Well, you can, because you want to. If somebody's injured, you don't know if a person's alive or dead. If a person's not moving, right? There's something called first aid, and your mother's actually a nurse, right? And nurses and doctors, they can check these people, or a person taking out your mouth. If it is an EMT, they can check the person, make sure that sometimes the person looks like they're dead and they're actually not dead, right? So they can bring them back to life. They can do CPR. They can do things to try to save their life, even if they're not moving, right?
If it's really not alive, then if there's water at the brick, at Emma's brick, then she can't go there anymore.
That's right. In the hospital, that's a good point.
Or the cars are going round.
That's right. If there's a flood by the hospital, that's a real problem, because then the hospital's flooded, and then there's nowhere to take the injured people to. So they have to find another location or another hospital to take them to, another facility.
But
if a nurse or a
if
doctor
they know-
is at like home,
Emma,
then you can take them there.
Mm-hmm, that's true.
if there's no hospital, you can bring the sick people to the doctor.
Right. If you know where the doctor lives, but you know what? A lot of people,
But a lot of people can bring them there.
right. But a lot of the doctors don't have hospitals in their houses, so they're not ready for. They don't have lots of beds. They don't have all the equipment that they have to save people. Because being a doctor is more than just having the knowledge and understanding how to fix people. It's also has to do with having the right equipment, having the right tools, right? Having all the bandages and all the medicines. And most doctors don't have that in their houses, right?
But-
That's only at their work.
But you don't need to go to houses.
What happens if the hospital gets flooded and you went and go to someone's house and they have a doctor there or a nurse there, and they had a lot of people that they needed the same thing, they needed the certain kind of medicine, and they only had like a certain amount, and then it gets finished and other people need them, they'll.
That's a real problem. You know, in any emergency, any kind of disaster, any kind of emergency situation, one of the things we plan on is, you know what we plan on? What to do with medicines. Because once like you said, once the medicines are out, if somebody needs a medicine, that's a big problem, right? So one of the things, there's pharmacies, you know where we get medicine from pharmacies?
Like Giant Eagle?
Like Giant Eagle has a pharmacy, right? So when we go to a pharmacy, they only have a small amount of medicines, and it looks like a lot. But if a lot of people need the medicine quickly, they're not able to provide everybody with the medicines. So we have to be prepared to have, to know where there's medicines that if we need, where we're gonna get them from, right? The other thing I wanted to talk about.
Emma,
Yes, did you want to say something else?
if there's water next to the doctor and no other way, and no one allowed it, and it's going to drown, and no people can go anywhere
What happens?
You
to
mean,
be checked.
oh, you mean what happens if the doctor gets lost?
Yeah.
That's a problem. So we have to be very careful to make sure that we have medical professionals, we have doctors and nurses and medics.
If the doctors are in the doctor office, then and there's water outside, and to wash it off, then they're going to be washed off, and no one allowed to be checked if there are no doctors.
Right.
What happens when there's a flood and the medicine might be like on a low place and the flood just like washes the medicine away?
That's a wonderful question. Because a lot of people, even if they're preppers and they have things that are prepared, so they have a lot of the stuff, where do they keep it? They keep it in the basement. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Usually people don't have extra room to store things on their other floors, so they store things in the basement. The other reason is because the basements are usually cool.
When they
And-
usually big.
Right, they're cool places, so it's a good place to put food because food usually lasts longer when it's cool. But what happens if you have all your preparations in the basement and then it gets flooded? Then you've lost all your preparations and then you're stuck. So it's always a good idea. Preppers always talk about contingencies, having a plan B, to have something somewhere else just in case you lose the things that you've prepared in your basement.
Like upstairs, we have like the box with all the food.
It's good to have it, and it's also good to have it in another location. If you have another location where you can have things, let's say something happens in your house, you'll have it somewhere else. Those are all good ideas.
Some people have they dig deep and underground and then put stuff inside.
That's right. There's something called caches. There are people that actually dig holes in the ground, and they'll actually store things inside the ground in other locations. So if they get stuck and they lose everything, they'll have something in another location. Yes.
What happens if they're done with all their food?
If the medicine downstairs and it goes and wash up the house,
Floods the house.
the medicine will all fall out.
Well, that's what Tamara was speaking about, that if it gets flooded and you lose everything that's in the house, what are you gonna do? So it's important to have things not only in their house, but to have things outside your house. You had a question?
What happens if, like, if a flood, it can goes if all the water comes into the water comes into the ground, then if people like dig and put their food inside, the food will just get like all wet, and if they have boxes, it'll just like go right there.
Right, so you don't wanna, if you're gonna bury something in the ground,
Have to go deep, like,
well, you don't want to, you don't wanna put it
Not-
in, you don't wanna put it in a, excuse me, you don't wanna put it in a box, and you don't wanna just put the food right in the ground, because it'll get ruined right away. The bugs will eat it, and it'll get water on it, like you said.
you can't dig so deep, or else there's gonna be more.
Well, what you wanna do is you wanna make sure that it's in an airtight, water-sealed container. So some sort of plastic container, it's some sort of plastic container that's sealed, so that way the elements won't get to it, the water won't get to it, the bugs won't get to it, and that way it'll be secure, that if you need it, you can dig it up and have it, yes.
If the bugs are outside and water come up outside, they're going to die, then how do they not be alive?
What are we talking about, the bugs?
Yeah.
We're not talking about bugs right now. So let's talk about something else. Let's talk about what happens in another situation tomorrow. Let's say, forget the natural disasters, let's say there's a robber or a terrorist attack. Let's say someone's attacking you. So what happens in a case where someone's attacking your house or your family or something? What do you do then? Any ideas? What do you think? What?
I think that the mothers are downstairs and they can save the kids. And
The mothers and the fathers, that's right. Well,
But if people are downstairs, and usually people don't have safes like upstairs and stuff, and they're downstairs, they can just like open the safe and take the guns out or something like that.
well, if the family has guns, that's already a good start. Let's talk about this now, please.
you have a
Right,
gun.
right, I have a gun. So people that have guns, they're able to protect themselves. So if,
Have a,
one second, so if a robber comes in or somebody tries to cause us harm, we can protect ourselves, right?
I know how to
And
use
it-
a gun.
Yeah, it's important for everybody to know, first of all, gun safety, right? To know how to safely have a gun, right? To safely have a gun and not to touch it. We don't touch guns, right? Real guns we never touch.
Could you help me? You have to teach people how to hold it right.
That's right. You have to know how to hold it. You have to know how to shoot. These are all things that we
Like
learn.
the small guns, you have to hold it a certain way.
That's all. Well, all guns you have to hold a certain way, and you want to make sure that no one gets hurt. But that's one way to protect yourself. But there's other ways also, right? Let's say, as children, right? Let's say you don't have guns, so and there's somebody breaks in. So what you want to do is you want to stay away from those people, right? So what do you do to stay away from those people?
if someone goes through the door,
Should call 911.
That's if you're able to, you want to call 911. Absolutely, that's a good idea because
if
you want the
someone
police to come right
breaks-
away.
if someone breaks into your house, you need to hide so they don't find you and they don't get you.
Right. Now let me take a step back. All the things we're talking about, you always want to call 911 if you can, right? If you're able to pick up the phone, if there's a flood, if there's a fire, if there's a robber, whatever the case may be, if you're able to call the authorities and make sure that the firemen and the police and the ambulances can come, you want them all to come, right?
Yeah.
But where we're talking about a case where we've already called 911, and it's still, even when you call 911, the police don't show up instantly, right? It takes them time. It takes them 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and sometimes they can't show up because let's say there's a major disaster.
And there's a bunch of people that
And
have,
people are hurt all over the place. So like you said, there might not be doctors or hospitals, and the police might be not able to get out. A couple years ago, we had a big snowstorm, and the snow kept going up and up and up and up. And the ambulances, when people called 911 to call an ambulance, the ambulances couldn't even drive through the big snow.
when?
A couple of years ago. Yeah, you were around. So what happened was there was so much snow that the ambulances couldn't get through. So they actually brought in what's called the National Guard, and they actually brought these big jeeps in. And they're called Hummers, and they brought the Humvees in, and they were able to get through the snow.
What the
And
things that have like line coming out?
I'm not sure what you mean, but
If
they do have
if
things.
even robbers in your house, if you have a gun, you can shoot them. You can call the police and firemen.
Well, you want to do both, right? If you're, like I said, you always want to call the police and the firemen if you can, because
But the fireman has fire. In the police, they put people in jail.
right.
But they can
But
also do
it's
other
all the
stuff.
same. 911. You're right. The firemen deal with fires, and the police deal with other things. But you want to make sure that you call 911. 911 is when you call 911, it calls the police and the fire and the ambulances. They're in touch with everybody. So it's all one number.
If there's a fire, you can call 911. If it in a house, you can call 911 to call the police and the firemen, so the firemen can take out the fire.
That's right. Now, I have another question for you. Did you have another thing that you wanted to talk about? What is it?
If like if you call the 911, then there's only like one person inside this office, and it has like, and you call that, and then it calls everybody, and it calls like all the people. But what happens if there's only like, if there's no people to come because they're all working at something else? What do?
That's a good point. Well, first of all, they have more than one person answering the phone calls. But even if they were inundated and there were so many people, so many calls that they weren't able to take it, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about a case where 911 is not going to help us, because 911 is not going to always be there to help.
Even if people don't have guns, they can stop other stuff. Like they can have knives, and they can have daggers, and they can have other stuff like that.
That's right. So you have to use whatever's necessary in order to protect your life, right? Because that's the number one rule, to stay alive. So that's what all being prepared is all about.
Emma,
Yes.
if there's water next to the police building, they can't go outside.
Right, or snow or anything like that.
And they can't drive anywhere.
They might be stuck. Now let me ask you another question. This is more practical, right? This happens all the time. What happens with as kids? What happens if you get lost? What happens if you're walking in an amusement park, you're in Kennywood, and you're playing, you're having a great time, and you turn around and you don't see your mother and father, you don't see your brothers and sisters, and everybody's gone? What do? You
should like either, if you can see a policeman or something, you should ask them like that you can't find their friend. But if you don't, you should ask someone you know, like if you can use their phone, if you know their number.
Right, and it's important to know your phone number, your father and mother's phone numbers, right?
I know your number.
You know my number, and you know my number. Now the question is that let's say you can't see any policemen, and you don't see anybody you know. Who else could you go to that you could trust to make sure that they're not going to be bad and they're not going to take you?
You can go to someone who you don't know and say that you want to use their phone and call their parents.
Okay, but you don't want to just go to anybody you don't know, because we don't go and talk to strangers, right?
You can go to someone who like works somewhere and you can ask them.
That's a good idea. So
There's more people
right.
around.
So let's say you're at Kennywood and you're at in an amusement park. So you can go to somebody who works, behind one of the booths. Somebody who works at Kennywood, and you can ask them to help you, right?
If there's an office with police inside their office, then you can tell them that you can't. No one's at the park.
You can't find your mother and father.
And what happens if you don't know if
they have a phone then you can use their phone.
That's right. That's
Because
right. Or they'll call for you. If you know your phone number, they can even call for you.
But I don't know your number.
Now what about what did you say?
what happens if you don't know your number
Right.
and if you don't know your number and you don't know your address and you find a policeman, you can't tell him like who to call.
That's the point. You need to know your number, because if you don't know your number, then they're not going to know that they can look you up by your name, but you might not. They might not be able to contact your father or mother. So we're going to take a short break now. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back in a few minutes and talk about some other things. Thank you. Welcome back to the Prepper Report. We're back here with my daughters, Sarah, 4 years old, and Tamar, 8 years old. And we're here discussing emergency preparedness for kids. And again, this is not a scripted thing. This is something where we're just having an open conversation to discuss what exactly needs to be done in case of an emergency and how kids feel. And I think that's a good way to start this session, is discussing about feelings. Tamara, what do you what kind of fears do you have? What kind of feelings do you have about what scares you? What are you worried about happening?
A hurricane?
You're worried about a hurricane? Do you have nightmares about it? Do you have thoughts about it?
That's like if there's a hurricane coming and you don't know it's coming.
Mm-hmm. Where did you first learn about hurricanes? Is that from a movie, from TV, from your parents?
From school.
School? Did you learn about hurricanes? And that's a pretty scary thought, isn't it, having a hurricane? Now, we're very fortunate because in Pittsburgh, we don't have too many hurricanes, right? Hurricanes it's not an area that's prone to hurricanes. But you know what? These kind of storms can happen anything. Here in Pittsburgh, you know what we have? Sarah, you know what we have in Pittsburgh? We have something we have flash floods.
I know.
And we also have some storms that come through very, very quickly. They're called microbursts. And they come through just like a hurricane or a tornado. They come through and they can destroy houses. And it is pretty scary. It's a scary thought. What worries you, Sarah?
You drowned.
Drowning. Yeah, floods could be very, very scary, right? If there's water around, and it's even scarier for kids.
If kids drown inside, then the mothers can't see it ever again.
If kids drown and the mothers can't see them.
What
Yeah,
happens?
you know what? It's even scarier. You're right. Water is very scary, especially if you don't know how to swim, right? Learning
I
how
don't
to
have to swim.
Right, you know a little bit how to swim, and you know a little bit how to swim. But
I don't know how to live.
unless you're a really good swimmer, water can be really scary. And even if you're even the best swimmer in the world, if there's a big flood, there's nothing. Even a best swimmer in the world can get hurt in a big flood. What did you want to say?
Since it's at our camp, we have even the shallow ends very deep.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for St. Marco's age, they have lifeguards surrounding the whole entire pool, and then lifeguards actually holding them.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure they won't
No,
fall.
they don't always hold me.
I know, they just watch them.
No,
Also inside the pool.
Well, you always have to have a lifeguard, right? If you're by a swim.
There's lifeguards surrounding
Mhm.
the whole place, and they have like safety check. Like we have like kind of groups, and they say, and if they're missing if one group's one, they all have to scream one, and then they know like if anybody's like if you can't see them and someone's drowning, they know who's like not there.
So you're right. On a swimming pool is also something that happens all the time. And you know what? That part of emergency preparedness, part about it being prepared. Part of what is being prepared in emergency is just being generally prepared. Just like you're prepared for a fire, or you're prepared for something that would happen every day in a swimming pool. So you could also be prepared in case there's an emergency, a natural disaster, or something like that, right?
Abba,
Yes.
the lifeguards, they don't hold us.
Mm-hmm. What do they do?
This stuff, what we go on and they hold it.
Like a foam board?
Yeah. Floating board.
Mm-hmm.
And they have these lines.
Mm-hmm.
And you go on them and they hold the black thing, what's the line?
Mm-hmm. And if you've ever run on a boat, so you wear a life vest, right, on the boat?
Really? But when we went on a cruise, we didn't have to.
Right, but on a cruise, they always have life vests in the boat, just in case there was an emergency. They would always have.
They usually have for like much older people.
No, they have they know exactly who's on the boat. That's the captain's job, to know exactly who's on the boat, how old they are, and make sure there's enough lifeboats and enough life vests for everybody that's on the boat. Yes. So.
If the lifeguards don't hold all the stuff from camp, but I go on, then the stuff will drown in the swimming pool if it's really big.
That's right. That's right. So let me ask you, what are you worried about? You're worried about swimming pools and drowning and floods?
No.
What are you worried about?
Hurricane.
Hurricanes. You're worried about hurricanes. So these are all very serious concerns, and every kid, especially today, kids are watching more TV, and sometimes TV is violent and has all sorts of things and it can cause a lot of concern. You know, people can have nightmares about certain things happening, and a person that's properly prepared is going to be a lot less fearful. They're going to be a lot less scared because they're going to know that if something happens, they're prepared to deal with it. Yes. Okay, sit down. So what else do you want to discuss?
I'm also kind of scared of like when I hear thunder,
Mm-hmm.
when it's really loud.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when I'm outside and I hear thunder, I just like go upstairs.
Thunder. Now, thunder itself is not something that's scary, right?
But when you hear the sound, it's like
The
kinda
sound can
scary.
be, loud sounds can be scary. And that's one of the things we have to discuss, we have to think about in a natural disaster, right? Whether it be a flood or a hurricane or any kind of natural disaster or earthquake, there's gonna be a lot of scary things, even if it doesn't happen to you right away. And you know what? I just thought of something else. On the 4th of July, yes, on 4th of July,
Oh, like the fireworks.
there's
is kinda scary.
fireworks, right? Fireworks can be scary to people also.
The
But you know
kids,
what?
yeah.
That's right. But you know what? Fireworks, if you're prepared for it, and your kids know what to be prepared for because they know that there's something going to happen and they know about the fireworks, then they're not going to be so scared. Another thing that we have to worry about, and it gets back to fire, is being ready for fireworks.
Outside.
You have to sit down. Okay. So if there's
I can't reach the water.
okay, you go out and I'll be there soon. So if there's a fire from fireworks, right? Fireworks can be dangerous as well. So we have to be really careful with safety when it comes to fireworks. People that use fireworks have to know how to use them and have to make sure that there's enough distance around everybody so no one else is going to get hurt from them. But even the sounds, especially for small kids, can be very, very scary. But again, if you're prepared for things, if you know, let's say you've prepared your children and you know the kids know that there's going to be fireworks and fireworks are not going to hurt you because you're far enough away that it's not going to injure you. So then just because there's a loud noise doesn't mean that that's something to be scared of, right? It's something that you can enjoy. You can see the beautiful, lights in the sky and then hear the noises and you can enjoy it instead of being scared of it. And that goes with anything that you have to be prepared for. If you're prepared properly, you're not going to be fearful of it, right? So that's one of the things that we have to remember, right? Now another thing I wanted to ask you, when you're in school, do you have emergency drills in school? Do you ever have a fire drill where everybody goes outside?
We have
When the alarm goes off and everybody goes outside when there's a fire drill? Did you ever have that? You didn't have that? What about you, Tamar?
we have like every 3 weeks we usually have practice fire alarms, and one time there's actually I think it was real fire, but it was really small, and if it was big enough it would probably catch our whole school on fire because a lot of the lights were still on.
So, but what did you do in an emergency drill? You know what an emergency drill does?
It
And-
starts like ringing really
And it
loud.
rings, and all the classes, all the teachers know what to do with the kids, and they know how to go slow and to everybody to line up and to go to a certain place outside where they can make sure that all the kids are outside. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, Sarah, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about
I
is,
want to talk to you for a second.
yes.
At school,
Mhm.
we line up and we go outside to play
That's right.
a little.
And it's the same thing during an emergency drill. They line up and everybody goes outside in an organized fashion, right?
But some of the kids, they go in 2 lines.
Right.
So it's not long line
Mm-hmm.
till drill.
Right. Now, when the school prepares you for that, one second.
No.
When the school prepares you for that, it's something that, Tamar, it's something when the school's preparing you for that, It's something that gets ingrained in your, you need to sit down. It's something that gets ingrained in you, and that way you learn it and you do it over and over again so that if it actually happens, you're gonna be ready like this, that you'll be able to go and do it, right? And it's the same thing when it comes to any kind of disaster, any kind of emergency. If you've practiced, and you've practiced over, let's say you've arranged with the family that if there's some sort of an emergency, and you need, if there's some sort of emergency, let's say everybody in the family is gonna meet at the park, okay? So everybody's gonna meet at the park. So if everybody's meeting at the park, right, and there's something happens and everybody runs to the park and somebody doesn't know, they could be left behind. And that can be very scary. But if everybody knows that they now have one meeting place where they're going to meet, and it's not gonna be, and that way, if there's an emergency, they know that everybody's gonna be there, and you know that your father and mother are gonna be there, then you don't have to be afraid, right? Because you know that your father and mother are gonna be meeting you at that place, right? Now, what?
Time at a park, Ima's didn't leave without us.
Right, we never leave without you. But let me ask you another question. What if somebody gets injured? Right, this is something that happens all the time also. Let's say somebody gets injured and somebody gets hurt. And there's you see a kid that fell. Let's say somebody falls off of a big slide and they're lying down on the ground. You need to turn around. They're lying down on the ground, okay? And they're not moving, right? And it looks like they may not be breathing. So what do you do with it? What do you do? What happens if a kid really gets hurt? Let's say they're bleeding. What do you do with a kid like that?
You need to go home and get a Band-Aid and put it on the bleeding.
Putting a Band-Aid, yeah, but you know what? A Band-Aid doesn't solve all problems. If a person's bleeding enough and a person really is injured, then a Band-Aid's not gonna help them. What they need to do is something much more serious. First thing you need to do is you have to call. Who do you have to call? Who are you gonna call tomorrow? 911? If you can call 911, you do. But what happens if you don't have a phone? Most kids don't have cell phones, little kids.
You need to call.
If you have a home phone, you can call on that.
Right. The first thing.
If you don't have any phones at your house,
right,
then
you go to someone else.
You go to someone else's house, and you ask them if you can use their phone, and they will let you use their phone.
Right. And you want to tell an adult right away. You want to tell an adult and you want to tell them there's an emergency, there's a kid that's injured, that's hurt, right? And that you need to come right away. And the adult can
If a person's not breathing, then you need to call 911.
Correct. Now I have another scenario for you. This is a very scary thing for kids. This is something that's a real concern. What about child abductions? Did you ever hear of a child abduction? Let's say somebody tries to take a kid. Let's say you're walking down the street, and all of a sudden somebody comes from behind you and grabs you, and starts to drag you somewhere. Or let's say tries to ensnare you. Let's say somebody says, "Come into my car, little girl, and I'll give you some candy." Do you listen to that kind of person if it's a stranger? No.
You say no.
You say no, of course. And then what do? You run away, right? Because you don't want to be near anybody like that.
But if he's already driving, do you?
You want to get away from them, and you want to tell an adult right away. And same thing. What if a person grabs you, Tamar, and grabs you from behind?
And they like close their eyes. You're supposed to kick them. And then instead of karate, you're supposed to kick on the certain part of right here. So
Kick them in the knee.
Yeah,
Well, if you can kick them to get away, that's good. But the most important thing to do. 1 second. The most important thing to do is to scream really loud that a stranger is taking me, right? You scream and you scream and you scream that a stranger is taking me, a stranger is taking me. And then you try to get away. And if you get away, you run very, very quickly. You run away from that person, right?
But if I have hiking shoes on, then I can run really fast.
Right. And if you run away, right away you have to go to an adult. You have to tell them that a stranger tried to take you, and have them call 911, call the police, and tell them what happened. Yes.
What happens if there's a more than one, and they're surrounding you and you can't really get out.
It's a scary thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
There are more than one people.
If you're a big kid and strangers come to you and try to take you, and you have a phone, then you can call 911
Right.
if they're all around you.
Right. The other thing you do, you can always scream, right, for help.
If no one can hear you. Like if there's, like if you're inside of a car and all the windows are closed, or like if they're holding you and they hold their like their mouth.
Right.
Something.
So what you want to do is you want to do your best job to scream and let other people know and try to get away from there. Those are the two most important things: is to scream, let other people know that somebody's trying to take you, and to run away and try to escape as quickly as possible, however you could do it.
Emma?
Yes.
If a stranger comes with a big bag to put someone in there, they can take, the strangers can take someone else's daughter.
So that's why you have to make sure to scream.
So,
But usually they don't. You're
but
not supposed to.
if you don't have a phone, then you can't call anyone.
Right. But before they put you in a bag, you could scream, right? And you could yell and tell other people that they're trying to take you, and you could try to escape.
Eva, but if they already covered me up, then you can't read, so you can't call anymore and run away.
That's really scary. I know. Well, that's why you have to try to do it right. You have to do it right away before they do that.
But if he doesn't hold the bag and I go out and
You run
I
away.
run away, that will not be scary.
Right. And where would you go to?
No, it would probably
I
be worse.
I'll go to not a person who I know and tell them if I can use their phone.
Right.
And I call 911.
Right. You're gonna call 911, and you're also gonna call your parents, right? You have to call your father and mother.
I gonna call the police and tell them what happened.
But you would also be more scared because you
But
just
then
you just
I
like
can
tell
call my
feels.
father if after I call the police.
Right. Right. First you want to call the police, and then you want to call your father. That's exactly right. Now.
Or if my father's not there, then I can just call my mother. But if my mother's not there and no one's there, then I can't call. No, I can't call anyone.
What happens if you're like inside the park and your parents went away for vacation and there's a babysitter and she's like all the way with your baby sister on the swings and there's like no one else there and people and then robbers come and then they like take you away. You have no one to talk to because like there's everyone's like doing other stuff and it was like at home. What do you do?
Well, just like your whoever's watching you, whether it be a babysitter or your parents or your older siblings or an adult, whoever's going to be watching you, that's the person you want to try to let them know what's happening. If they're on the other side of the park and they don't hear you, first of all, it's not a good situation. You don't want to be on the other side of the park so far away that the person who's watching you doesn't know, can't see you, and can't hear you. But if that ever happened, then you want to make sure that you scream really loud, right?
Emma.
Can you scream really loud?
Yeah.
Let's hear you scream really loud.
Ah!
Right. And you would say somebody's taking me. Can you say someone's taking me? A stranger's taking me. Can you, right? And you do that, and then anybody who's around, maybe somebody's in a house. Maybe someone would hear you inside a house. They might not be outside in the park. They might be in one of the houses, and they would hear you, and they would call 911, and they would come out and try to help you.
What happens if there's a fire and that's exactly when like the robbers come because they probably made.
You're right. You're exactly right. That happens, and you want to know what you do? What do? You tell me, because I think you know. I think we've already discussed it. What do you do tomorrow?
I know.
1 second, Tamara speaking. What do you do? Do you call 911?
No.
Do you call out for help?
No.
What do?
You run away.
You run away. Well, you gave a few, Tamara, I'm sorry. There's a few things that you have to think about. The first thing is that there's a fire. What are you going to do with a fire?
You can't call your mother or
Right.
the police.
You want to call out, right? You want to call somebody, right? You always want to call somebody, Tamara.
But
You always want to call somebody, and you always want to ask. You want to.
You can scream out loud.
You want to scream out loud, right? You can scream very loud.
If people not in the houses.
That's right. You want to scream loud, and you want to make sure that somebody hears you. You want to call 911. You want to make sure that you get out of the house quickly, and you meet at whatever meeting point you've arranged with your parents to meet at.
But if there's a fire on the porch,
Yeah.
you can't go outside.
If there's a fire on the porch, if there's a fire on the porch, you want to stay away from the porch, right? Wherever the fire is, you want to make sure you stay away from that place. Yes.
If there's fire next to the door, you can't go out.
Right. If there's fire next to the door, then you remember what we said? You feel the door, and if the door is hot, what do?
You don't open up that door.
Right, because there could be a big fire on the outside. And you know what happens?
But
A lot of times when there's a fire, the most dangerous part of the fire, you know what it is? It's not the fire itself. It's the smoke that comes out of the fire. So sometimes the smoke fills up the whole house, and when it's filling up the house, somebody can God forbid, wake up, and the smoke could be everywhere. Now, another thing we forgot to mention in a fire. One thing we forgot to mention. When you drop, right? When there's a fire and there's smoke, smoke usually rises to the top, to higher. So if you want to breathe, 1 second. If you want to breathe, where do you go to breathe? If the smoke's up on top, where do you go, Tamar? Where do you go, Summer?
If it's outside, then you.
No, if you're inside the house and the smoke is up on top of the ceiling and it's up in the air, where do you want to be?
In your house?
Inside your house. If the smoke's up here, where do you want to be if it's up here? Do you want to be in the smoke?
No, you go outside.
No, but you want to go down to the floor. You want to crawl on the floor to make sure that you can breathe, because the air is going to go down to the floor, the smoke's going to go up top, and you want to make sure that you're very, very low on the floor, because that way you can still breathe.
But if you lie down on the floor, you can also do that.
Well, you have to crawl. You can crawl on the floor. You don't
I can crawl.
You can crawl, right. Every baby knows how to crawl, so they crawl on the floor, and that way they can breathe. They can still breathe. Another thing you could do is you could take a wet towel.
See how I thought?
You could show me a wet towel, and you could put it over your face, right? And that also can help keep the smoke outside of your nose and outside of your mouth and all.
If you can't breathe or hear anyone, and there's a fire next to a doctor, you can't go there.
That's right. If there's a fire, wherever the fire is, you can't go there. That's right.
If the fire is all around the doctor, you can't go.
That's right. We stay far away from the fires, right? And even if there was a fire that wasn't bothering you, let's say it was in the park outside on the corner of a park, you want to make sure you have to wait. You want to make sure that that you don't go near fire, right? So you want to stay far away from the fire, because sometimes fires can happen outside, and they can be brush fires, and they can go all over the place, and you have to make sure you stay far away from the fire. Yes. Okay, so let's just finish off. No. We have to. One more thing I want to talk about. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is the most important thing, and that is to make sure that whenever there's an emergency, you make sure that you try to do your best to contact an adult, to contact the law enforcement, the police, the fire, the emergency services, and make sure that they're able to help you out. And I think that this has been a wonderful conversation. We discussed all sorts of emergencies, all sorts of things that could happen to children, and just like yourself, all children worry about things. Everybody has their different concerns, things that worry them, whether it be a fire or an earthquake or a flood, and these things can happen, and it's important to everybody out there to talk to their children, to sit down just like we just did here and have an honest one-to-one conversation with them, to discuss what to do in case of an emergency, discuss different scenarios. What would you do in this case, or what would you do in that case? And it's really important for parents out there to have this conversation with their children. It's something that's lacking. Most parents think that it's never going to happen to them, but it could happen to you. And that's why we're here to warn you and to let you know that it's important for everybody out there to tell their children. I just want to finish off by saying that everybody out there, we're always looking on the Prepper Report for new talent, for people to come in, discuss different issues. If you're interested, please contact us. We're going to have our email over there. It's good. It's prepperreport@gmail.com. Anyone who wants to contact us, has any suggestions, any comments, please feel free to comment, to email me. And if you want to come into the studio, we'll make an arrangement for you to come in and discuss different topics. We'd love to have people from the public come out to us. We want to thank everybody that's helped out. You know, our studio crew, PCTV, and the city of Pittsburgh, everybody who's been helpful, and of course my children, Sarah and Tamara, the stars today. You've been great. You actually did a wonderful job telling the public how children feel and what people should think about when they're educating their children. Thank you very much for visiting us on the Prep Report, and we look forward to seeing you next week.